Hi everyone, it's Michael, and today's video focuses on easing my Dendrobium Nobile out of winter dormancy. Now, I'll link the video below where I discussed exploring winter dormancy, and I kind of talked through how I put each different type of orchid into dormancy when it requires one. So I talked through my catasetums, I talked through my Dendrobium nobiles, I talked through my Eulophia, but today we're just focusing on easing out my Dendrobium nobile. Now, the key indicator for when you're supposed to resume watering or start reincorporating some water into the grow environment is when you see the formation of new flower buds. So as you can see right over here, and I'll take you in closer in just a moment, there are some new flower buds coming in right here. But actually, these appeared around mid-January, so I've held off and held off and held off from reincorporating water into the grow environment. And the reason that I've waited so long is because I was really anticipating or hoping that there would be some new flower buds that grew on the newer canes. Unfortunately, they just never came, and I only got one new bud right on this side. Apparently that happens periodically. I was talking to Kent from Fantasy Orchids. This one in particular is difficult to rebloom with a lot of blooms. So maybe next year I'll see how I can kind of tweak this to see if I could really increase how many blooms I get. But I held up as long as I did because I wanted to see if new buds would form on the new canes. So that being said, let's go in closer and talk through what's going on in this container. Now, this orchid, the last time it was watered was November 20th. So this has been dry for quite some time now, and it has continued its growth uninterrupted. As we look at the root system, you can see there's plenty of beautiful green root tips. Everything seems to be going just fine. They're expanding, they're continuing to grow. I was super concerned that the roots might become desiccated by the wicking properties of the leca pellets, but they just never did. They were just fine. Moving up, you can see that there's not one, but two new growths, two new canes coming through, so that's a really fabulous indicator. And as we continue upward, you can see that the canes themselves are actually starting to become really shriveled. Or maybe not really shriveled, just significantly enough that it causes my concern. So when that starts to happen, that's the time to give them a flush of water. Again, I avoided it for longer than I should have, but I think now is the time. But I will also take you in on the buds themselves because the buds are just darling. And you can see there's two little cuties coming through. And I just want to make sure that they have enough moisture to support their growth. So this poor guy hasn't had a sip of water since the end of November. So what we're going to do is give him just a sip. And in the same way that we slowly and progressively transitioned this orchid into dormancy, we're going to do the same taking it out of dormancy. So if you recall, what we did is first of all, we removed fertilizer from the nutrient solution. And then we reduced the frequency of watering before we completely eliminated watering altogether. So basically, we're just going to invert that process of how we took it into dormancy as we take it out. So rather than giving this a whole reservoir of water to drink from, rather than giving it nutrient solution, I'm going to start slowly by just giving it a flush of water. So rather than actually filling the water reservoir, I'm going to take plain distilled water, completely nutrient deficient. I'm going to flush the system, and then I'm going to dump out all of the excess water. I'm going to proceed this way for a period of about 3 more weeks. So it'll be getting water at the same frequency as the rest of my orchids. So I water once a week, I refresh the water reservoir once a week. But rather than filling the water reservoir, I'm going to flush it and I'm going to empty it. After that, I'm going to start filling the water reservoir with just plain distilled water. And I'll do that for maybe another 2 or 3 weeks. And after that process is complete, I will reintroduce nutrient solution into the grow environment. So that's pretty much the process. I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Okay, perfect. So now, as I mentioned, I'm going to dump everything that's sitting in the water reservoir. And there we have it. Now, in theory, this should pretty quickly replump up those shriveling canes and kind of just reinvigorate the plant. I just want to mention that there are different ways to do this. I know a lot of semi-hydroponic growers who actually never stop giving water to their orchids at all. They just reduce it exclusively to plain distilled water, and they do what I'm doing now. So rather than letting water sit in the water reservoir, they just flush it and dump it out. So that's a viable option as well. I was super concerned this year going into this process that by virtue of eliminating water altogether, it would really harm the plant. But I was really pleasantly surprised to find that it didn't. That being said, I do have a really strong source of ambient humidity with my ultrasonic humidifier, so it did have moisture to pull from the air. So you have to kind of negotiate all of those variables and figure out exactly what's going to work best for you. But I liked not watering. It was way easier for me. I've got so many orchids now, guys. I'm up to 45. And just having a grouping of orchids that were completely in dormancy that didn't require water or attention or time was actually kind of a nice little break for me. So that's something to consider. Thank you guys so much for choosing to spend your time with me. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, please don't hesitate to leave them in the comment section below. Be sure to click subscribe and have a beautiful rest of your day.